Picture this. You're working between 80 and 100 hours a week. You're living off 2-minute noodles. You've gone back home so you can reduce your rent, so you have more money to plow into the business. And you're really working hard to build this thing up every day. Your business partner still has their 9-to-5 job. They are helping you after hours and on weekends. However, you own the company 50-50. How did we get here? Is that fair? Welcome to our podcast, Don't Chew with Our Mouth Open, with your mouth open. I hope you will enjoy as we discuss the equity trap in this discussion. Stay tuned. Welcome to our episode of our podcast, Don't Chew with Your Mouth Open, where we'll discuss business, economics, finance, investments, and wealth creation for the global south. Welcome to our podcast, Don't Chew. Snapchat founder Reggie Brown is one of the guys who started the business. He contributed to the idea of disappearing images. However, he never got any equity in the business. So while his founders continued to build this business and became billionaires, he had to go to court and got a cash settlement of $150 million. Again, what was it about? What was his contribution? What was the other founder's contribution to the business? And we've got to always think about this. How do we measure what each person brings to the table? Because that measurement determines how much of the pie each founder gets. As you grow the business, investors will come in, they'll dilute your stock, your business will become more valuable. But how you've got to be clear from the beginning, who's bringing what and what does that mean? So let's dig into how you measure this. There's 3 ways to measure the value of your contribution. The first way is risk. So how much of your time, your energy have you put on the line? If this doesn't work out, what happens to you? If you lose this business, what do you lose? So if you are the individual who's gone and borrowed money, who's working on the business 9-to-5, who's sacrificing and has moved back home and so on and so forth, you are carrying more risk. If the other individual still has their job, can afford to live the lifestyle they live, your risk is different. So you need to be rewarded for your risk. The second element is capital contribution. How much have each of you put into the business? There are some individuals who will say, I will not work in the business, I'll contribute capital. Then you are no longer a founder, you're an investor. And that's okay. But you can't hold the same level of equity, decision-making, opportunity over and direction over the business as someone who wakes up and does this every day. The third element to measure is skill. What are the skills you bring to the table? Do your skills speak directly to the business we're doing? How do they speak to that, and how are we going to go about addressing that? So those 3 elements are the key elements to measure when we look at how do the equity splits happen. The individual who has more risk, who introduces more capital, and has the right skills for the business should have more equity than the partner who doesn't. Now, if the risk is equal, the capital is equal, and the skills are comparable, they don't necessarily have to be equal, but comparable. You bring a certain set of skills, and another partner brings a certain set of skills, and they work well together, then we can talk about relatively equal splits. But before then, you have to assure the individual who's carrying the risk, both on the capital side and personally, and who has the skills, has the right to have more of the upside. Now, there are many ways to protect your equity, because as investors come in to help you grow your business, it changes the dynamics of your business. But there are a few fundamental rules. The first rule is whenever somebody comes into your business, even the equity you have must be more valuable than the equity you had prior to their entry. So if someone comes into your business and invests, and you move from owning 50% to 40%, that 40% must be more valuable than the 50% which you held previously. So the value element is important. 2, risk. understand who is actually liable if this business fails. You need to always be clear about who is at risk. 3, skills. What am I bringing to the table? What is the other individual bringing to the table? Can we quantify it? Which is why it's important to remove all elements of emotion and come up with a structure that clearly outlines the way we will divide this business up. What has driven us to address this topic? Well, again, we had someone who reached out to us who's got a bright idea for a business. They have 2 colleagues. There are 3 of them fresh out of university. They have an idea. They are trying to address the idea. One individual is the sales skilled person, understands people, is able to go out there and get business. The other party is a structured accountant. The third party is the technical skills for developing this piece of technology. How do they go about dividing the equity? Again, the same metric we spoke about. Who's funding the business? The sales party has stated, who emailed us, that they are largely going to contribute to the business. What it means then is that they must have an outsized amount of equity to contribute for the other 2 parties not contributing financially. 2, the other parties are all in. The accountant is not all in. He has a bookkeeping job on the side while being a student. The other 2 parties then are all in on the business. They then will get a disproportionate amount of equity for that. The skills, the technical side, the technical founder is responsible for building the business, the technology around the business. The sales party, who will be the CEO, is responsible for driving the sales. The accounting party is making sure the governance of the business is sound. And that is an important skill. And those 3 skills are complementary. So there's an equity relative to parity in that dynamic. So when you look at that metric, you realize that each partner will not have the same amount of equity when the business begins. And as they build the business, each partner will feel rewarded for their efforts. And it's important to outline those elements from the beginning. I really wish these founders well, and I hope we can be speaking about them in future. We have to address one key issue, the resentment factor. When one party is working longer nights and believes the other party is not pulling their weight, the resentment in the business grows. It becomes a downward spiral of I deserve more. A lot of the time, this issue is never addressed. As a result, there must be an annual review of how the equity is carved out in a business. And as we build the business, shares become issued based on performance that balance out your say in the business, your upside in the business, and your rewards in the business. It's important to have this methodology to ensure that you benefit from your work, and if one of the founders is not pulling their weight, over time will be diluted out. And we hope you understand, each of you who are out there, who are looking to start a business, who are looking to start a side hustle, that this is an emotionally taxing exercise. A business has a large psychological burden to you. And if you are not adequately rewarded for your efforts, and not just efforts, but results, you will always feel like you deserve more. Many people have resigned from businesses, have left quality companies, have sold their equity out of businesses because they felt they deserved more than they were worth. Many people have been accused of being bus riders, not bus drivers, who come into the business and are quickly rewarded equity, and they never really drive the value of the business up, but ride the value to the top. This again drives resentment. So let's focus on the basics. When you begin a business, make sure you consider the 3 factors: skills, capital, and make sure at the bottom of it all, risk. When you have managed those 3 factors well, How you then divvy out the equity within your business matters. I always advise, speak to professionals. There are many people within your circle who can advise you meaningfully on how to structure your business. Yes, it may seem pretty at the beginning to say, oh, great, you and me are starting the business, let's split it 50-50. 50-50 may seem fair, but it actually isn't. It isn't because it doesn't address those three factors.